the bustling city of Nashville, where every corner breathes music and fame, no one expected that, on any given afternoon, an elderly stranger would turn silence into gold. Much less that that moment would make an arrogant salesman beg for forgiveness in front of everyone. But first, subscribe to the channel now and stay with me until the end, because what the simple man revealed will not only change the way you see people, but will touch something much deeper within you. It was a clear afternoon in Nashville, the sun reflecting off the windows of the famous Henderson's Music Hall, one of the city's most respected and expensive stores. Inside, the sound of guitars being tuned mingled with the lively chatter of customers and employees. The air carried the sweet scent of polished wood, mingled with the aroma of fresh coffee wafting from the small machine in the background. Between a group of young tourists photographing every corner and a couple of professional musicians selecting rare picks, an elderly man slowly entered, wearing a worn brown coat, dust-stained boots, and a crumpled hat that looked as if it had survived decades of rain and sun. His steps were firm, but his pace was leisurely, as if he carried too much history to hurry. His eyes roamed the room with almost nostalgic attention, as if every guitar, banjo, and piano on display were part of a past he knew intimately. As he walked through the door, a brief tinkle of the metal bell echoed, but no one seemed to pay him any attention. Yet there was something about his posture, a serene, almost solemn manner, that made him seem, to anyone observing him closely, more than just another customer. It was as if time had slowed down just to allow him to enter. The elderly man approached the main counter, where a young salesperson in a tight dress shirt and a confident smile was typing something on his cell phone. The store's lighting reflected off the device's display, creating a glare that contrasted with his impatient expression. Without taking his eyes off the screen, the salesperson uttered a brief, "Can I help you?" in a tone that sounded more like impatience than courtesy. The man, in a calm, husky voice, replied, "I'd like to see that Martin guitar in the display case. May I play it for a few minutes?" The mention of the Martin, a highly prized model sought after by collectors, finally made the salesperson look up, but only to give him a once-over. The pause in his gaze was long enough to convey his silent judgment. Then, with a half-smile laden with irony, he replied, "That guitar costs more than your car, sir. Perhaps there's something more affordable for you in the back." When he said accessible, he tilted his chin back slightly, as if the word were a private joke. The comment carried not only prejudice but also the assumption that someone dressed in simple clothes shouldn't even play such a valuable instrument. It was a quick, cruel judgment, and, as everyone would soon discover, completely wrong. Some nearby customers noticed the exchange and cast curious glances. A young woman with curly hair, experimenting with a keyboard in the corner, stopped playing and frowned in discomfort. A tall man wearing a cowboy hat shook his head disapprovingly but said nothing. The elderly man didn't react to the humiliation. He maintained the same calm, almost paternal tone. "I'd just like to play one song, that's all." His unhurried statement seemed to carry an invisible weight, as if the request held more meaning than anyone there could imagine. The salesman snorted, rolled his eyes, and with slow, theatrical movements, took the guitar from the display case, acting as if he were making a sacrifice. The instrument was protected by a velvet stand, and when he removed it, the strings vibrated slightly with the movement, releasing a soft sound that vanished into the air. As he handed it over, the salesman made a point of adding, "Please don't scratch it. It's worth much more than it looks." Some people glanced at each other, uncomfortable with the rudeness. The elderly man simply nodded, accepting the guitar with an almost reverent care, as if holding a living piece of history. And at that moment, unbeknownst to anyone, history was about to begin to change, not with shouting or confrontation, but with notes that would make even the most skeptical stop and listen. The elderly man arranged the Martin guitar on his lap with almost ceremonial care, as if holding something sacred. His fingers, scarred by time and work, bore deep calluses and small scars, each telling a story no one there knew. As he lightly touched the strings, he felt a vibration run through his hands, as if the instrument recognized its owner. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and the silence in Henderson's music hall deepened. The salesman, still leaning against the counter, crossed his arms with a wry smile, expecting to hear shaky, untechnical chords. But what happened next made some customers stop what they were doing. The first chord came out clean, deep, with a timbre that seemed to echo beyond the walls of the store. It was a warm sound, charged with an emotional weight no one there expected. The elderly man's thumb struck the bass strings firmly, while his other fingers danced over the higher strings, forming melodies that intertwined like stories told in whispers. The harmony seemed to have been honed not by hours of practice, but by years of life and experience. With each note, the air seemed thicker, charged with an emotion difficult to name but impossible to ignore. There was something almost spiritual about the sound, as if each vibration were an invisible thread connecting everyone in that space to a distant, intimate, and mysteriously familiar past. Little by little, conversations fell silent. Piano keys stopped being pressed, and even the tinkling of the shop door faded. The soft metallic sound of the strings seemed to have the power to suspend time. A white-haired woman, leafing through a sheet music book, approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the movement of the elderly man's hands, as if afraid to miss a single gesture. A teenager wearing headphones removed them, intrigued, and stood near the wall, mesmerized by the melody. The salesman, sensing something changing in the room, uncrossed his arms and began observing him with an expression that mixed curiosity and an undisguised unease. The music wasn't just technically impeccable. It was soulful. It was a slow blues, with notes that stretched out as if seeking breathing room before surrendering to the next musical phrase. Some chords recalled the folk tradition, others had the raw intensity of country, and together they formed something that sounded like a confession. The old man's fingers moved with almost hypnotic precision, gliding from the guitar neck to the next fret, always finding the exact spot where the note needed to be played. There was no rush. Each sound seemed measured and carefully chosen, as if it were the last time it would ever be played. And even for those who knew nothing about music, it was impossible not to feel they were witnessing something rare. The old man then began to sing, his voice like ancient wood, rough yet warm, laden with scars and memories. The lyrics spoke of long roads, cold nights, lost loves, and promises never fulfilled. It was as if each verse were drawn from an invisible diary, written with tears and dust. A child with his parents sat on the floor to listen better, resting his chin on his hands. A tall man, who had previously been shaking his head in disapproval of the salesman, now stood with his arms crossed, not in judgment, but to contain his emotion. The store manager, drawn by the collective silence and the melody, emerged from the back room and stood in the doorway, watching. With each note, more people approached, forming a discreet circle around the old man. The sound seemed to penetrate each of them in a unique way. For some, it was nostalgia. For others, a reopened wound. For still others, a balm. The salesman, once confident and superior, felt a growing discomfort, as if each chord ripped away a part of his arrogance. He shifted in his seat, looked around, and realized everyone was fixated on the man he'd underestimated. And without knowing why, he felt a weight on his chest, a premonition that he was standing before someone much greater than he'd imagined. As the notes flowed, the melody gained an almost palpable force, invading every corner of Henderson's music hall like a rising wave of emotion and memory. The elderly man, with his eyes closed and an expression of profound feeling, seemed to be speaking directly to the souls of those present, laying bare his story without needing to say a word. His voice, despite its apparent fragility, carried an overwhelming intensity, full of nuances, as if each syllable contained a lifetime of suffering, hope, and resilience. The melody was a narrative, a silent testament to the invisible battles he had fought for decades, losses that weighed like stones, but also silent victories that only time could reveal. Each chord seemed to reveal hidden chapters of a life marked by struggles and silent overcoming, and the sound reverberated in the souls of those who listened, bringing to light memories both painful and beautiful at the same time. Customers who had previously wandered distractedly, laughing or fiddling with their phones, now stood motionless, as if hypnotized by the power of that moment. Some couldn't hold back the tears that silently ran down their faces, reflecting an unexpected emotional connection with the simple-looking man. The salesperson, standing behind the counter, felt his pride slowly fade, replaced by a mixture of embarrassment and growing fascination. A sudden desire to understand more about the mysterious figure who dominated the store with only his music and silent presence. At the height of the song, the elderly man slowly opened his eyes, which shone with a resolute calm and profound recognition that disarmed any trace of hostility in the room. His firm yet emotionally charged voice sang verses that spoke of honor, dignity, and the quiet courage of those who face life without fanfare, even when all seems lost. Each word seemed to pass through everyone's body like a subtle electric current, awakening repressed feelings that many kept hidden behind daily masks. Customers who had previously merely observed began to exchange emotional glances, a silent communion of respect and admiration for what they were witnessing. The store manager, already standing next to the salesperson, felt the weight of that singular moment, an unexpected turn that transformed that simple presentation into an unforgettable event. The man who had for so long been invisible, ignored by society and judged by his appearance, now occupied the center of attention, not for what he possessed, but for what he emanated. A wounded but resilient soul, a talent shaped by a life full of profound meaning. The salesman, feeling his own heart sink, began to understand that this humble request to play a guitar was just the surface of a much larger story. A story of redemption, courage, and legacy that he could never have imagined. When the last note finally echoed, the silence that filled the store was almost palpable, a reverent silence that seemed to freeze time, leaving in the air a complex mix of surprise, respect, and disbelief. The elderly man carefully put away his guitar, as if protecting an irreplaceable treasure, and gave a faint, serene smile, accompanied by a barely audible thank you, which seemed to carry the lightness of someone who has found peace. He looked around, capturing the gazes of those around him, as if to convey a message that went beyond words. The salesman, now visibly shaken and with a choked voice, took a hesitant step forward and, with sincere humility, apologized for his earlier behavior, his arrogance replaced by a genuine acknowledgement of his failure. But the elderly man, with a serene and compassionate gaze, shook his head and replied that forgiveness was not just a word, but a gift, an act of liberation for oneself and for those who grant it. In that moment, everyone understood they had witnessed something rare and sacred. Not just a musical performance, but a profound lesson about respect, humanity, and the capacity for redemption that resides within each person. The salesperson felt his heart sink, as if touched not only by the music, but by the dignity of a man who, despite humiliation and prejudice, kept his inner light intact. That moment would be forever etched in the store, in the hearts of those present, and, who knows, in the lives of everyone who crossed that path from then on. After the heavy silence that fell over the store, Samuel Carter took a deep breath, adjusted his worn hat, and looked around, feeling the weight of the fixed, attentive gazes. With a firmer voice, he began to tell a part of his story that had until then been closely guarded. He revealed that he spent most of his life away from the spotlight, living in a small town outside Nashville, where music was his refuge and his only language. For decades, Samuel composed songs that spoke of love, loss, and hope, but fate played a cruel trick on him. A close friend, to whom he trusted his compositions, sold the rights to his song to a famous artist, without him even knowing. That same song he had just played was now a hit on radio stations and playlists, but the true author was invisible to the world, trapped in poverty and oblivion. His voice trembled slightly as he revealed this, and his dry eyes filled with unshed tears, silent witnesses to a life marked by injustice and sacrifice. But even so, he maintained his dignity, his faith in music, and the hope of one day being recognized for the talent he never abandoned. Jake, the salesperson who had previously shown disdain, now felt an intense mixture of guilt, shame, and admiration growing within him. He couldn't believe how much he had judged Samuel solely by his plain appearance and worn clothes, without imagining the depths of that soul. This man, who to him was just another seemingly ordinary customer, carried a baggage of pain, talent, and perseverance that touched everyone in the store. Other customers and employees approached discreetly, trying to capture every word of that revelation that seemed to transform the room into a confessional of emotions. Samuel spoke of the difficult days, the struggle to survive without losing his passion for music, and how, despite betrayals and closed doors, he never gave up on his dream. "Music is my life, my escape, and my truth," he said, his eyes shining. He confessed that he wasn't there to buy a guitar, but to reconnect with that part of himself that never died, to prove that true talent transcends clothes, appearances, and circumstances. The store, until then a simple commercial space, had become an altar to a story of hope and delayed justice. As Samuel spoke, the atmosphere at Henderson's Music Hall transformed completely. What had once been a space for business and merchandise became the stage for true redemption, a meeting of lives marked by empathy and recognition. The manager, visibly moved, approached with slow, steady steps, offering Samuel a contract to release a new version of the song, now with the rights duly recognized. A gesture that symbolized more than a commercial agreement. It was a moral reparation. Jake, still struggling with the weight of his own surprise, made a point of issuing a public apology, his words charged with sincerity and regret, promising that he would never again judge anyone by their superficial appearance. The silence that followed was broken by timid applause, which soon grew louder, like a wave of support and solidarity. Everyone in the store felt they were witnessing not only Samuel's personal victory, but a profound lesson for life. A person's true worth lies in the stories they carry in their heart and the legacy they build, never in the clothes they wear or the status they appear to possess. Samuel smiled with a mixture of relief and hope, feeling that this day represented a rebirth, a chance to finally be seen, heard, and respected for who he truly was. Samuel took a deep breath, his gaze distant, as if reliving memories stored in long-closed boxes. He began to describe his youth, spent traveling through the small towns of the American South, where music was the voice of the forgotten and the dreamers. On those silent nights, under the starry sky, he would sit on sidewalks or near campfires, his guitar resting on his lap, letting the strings sing stories of broken hearts, fleeting joys, and dreams torn by the wind. He remembered his hands, calloused not only by the guitar strings, but by years of hard work on farms and dusty roads, where each day was a silent battle for survival. The cold nights were the hardest, when his weary body joined his soul to seek solace in the notes and melodies he created. He spoke of the premature loss of his wife, Clara, his muse and greatest supporter, who had passed too soon, leaving a void that never closed. This profound pain shaped his songs, transforming them into true hymns of resistance, love, and hope. Music, for Samuel, was not just a craft. It was a living flame that kept alive the memory of those who had left and lit the path for those who were still walking. As he narrated, listeners were transported to a vivid past, almost palpable in the dense air of the store. Samuel's words carried a deep melancholy, filling every corner of Henderson's music hall with a sense of presence and intimacy. It was as if everyone there could feel the chill of the night when he sang to strangers in the open air, seeking comfort in the stars and the silent responses of nature. The story of those homeless nights, when the only shelter was hope and music, touched hearts deeply, especially young Jake, who now looked at him with genuine and renewed respect. Samuel said he never sought fame or fortune, for his true reward had always been the ability to touch souls and transform pain into beauty. He spoke of the long, lonely walks, the rough hands that held the guitar like an extension of himself, and the unfamiliar faces that, even without words, offered smiles and a dose of humanity. Each story seemed not only to tell a story, but to build an invisible bridge between the elderly person and each person present, enveloping everyone in a silent current of empathy and deep understanding. The atmosphere inside the store changed completely, vibrating with a new energy, a mixture of reverence, gratitude, and renewed hope. Samuel concluded his story with a powerful message. True victory lies not in public recognition or fame, but in the ability to maintain faith in oneself and one's talent, even when the world insists on denying the light that shines within each of us. He humbly thanked the audience for the attention and space given to him, emphasizing that that day represented not only a new chapter for him, but a symbol for all who have ever been judged, forgotten, or underestimated. The salesman, Jake, visibly moved, made a silent promise to himself to never again judge anyone by their appearance or circumstances. The manager, moved by the sincerity of the moment, announced that he would prepare everything for the official release of the new version of the song, ensuring that Samuel would receive the credit he always deserved. As applause began to echo timidly through the store, the elderly man looked at the faces around him, feeling for the first time in a long time a mixture of relief, acceptance, and hope, the certainty that his talent and dignity would finally be recognized and respected. In the days following that unforgettable night, the atmosphere at Henderson's Music Hall changed completely, now charged with a new and hopeful energy. The manager, deeply touched by Samuel's story, tirelessly campaigned to release the new version of the song, now with proper credit. He coordinated the printing of flyers with Samuel's image and name, sent invitations to local radio stations and journalists interested in inspiring stories, and organized a team dedicated to promoting this unique moment. Samuel, for his part, felt an intense mix of emotions. At times, anxiety overwhelmed him, fear of the unknown and the exposure he had never sought. At other times, a flame of hope burned brightly, the certainty that, finally, the truth and his talent would be recognized. For hours, he revisited his old compositions, tuned his guitar, and prepared every note for the performance that would mark a new beginning that was much more than a professional one. It was a personal redemption, a balm for the wounds of decades of silence and invisibility. With each rehearsal, the music seemed to carry more soul, as if this long-awaited moment restored strength to the strings and to Samuel's own voice, which, despite his age, sounded with renewed energy. Jake, the salesman who had once laughed at Samuel, saw his own heart undergo a profound transformation. The impact of that experience and the story it told changed his perception of the people who walked through the store's doors. He learned to no longer judge by appearances, but to try to see the invisible struggles each individual carries. The humiliation he had previously felt for underestimating Samuel was replaced by a genuine feeling of respect and admiration. Furthermore, Jake began attending the elderly man's rehearsals, not only to help but to absorb every lesson that this man of hardship and immense talent could offer. Samuel became a silent mentor, an inexhaustible source of wisdom about overcoming obstacles, patience, and passion for art. Jake realized that Samuel's humility and quiet strength were lifelong lessons, and that his presence there changed not only the course of music but also the young salesman's own path, who gradually rewrote his story with more empathy and humanity. When the day of the performance finally arrived, the store was packed with a crowd of customers, friends, family, and curious people drawn by the story already spreading through Nashville. The simple space, once a mere retail space, transformed into a sanctuary of emotion and celebration. Samuel took the small makeshift stage, holding his guitar tightly and wearing a serene smile, aware of the weight of the moment. As the first notes echoed, a profound calm took over the audience. The melody flowed with a sincerity that touched every heart present, evoking tears and smiles, connecting everyone in a rare communion between strangers who shared the beauty of overcoming. The performance was more than music. It was a declaration of life, dignity, and hope. As the last note faded, applause erupted in waves, charged with genuine emotion and heartfelt recognition. On that modest stage, Samuel was no longer a forgotten man dressed in simple clothes, but a living symbol of the power of perseverance, talent, and the human spirit. From that day forward, Henderson's Music Hall would never be the same, nor would everyone who had the privilege of witnessing that memorable new beginning. In the days following that historic performance, an atmosphere of renewal and hope took over Henderson's Music Hall, which seemed to pulse with a new, almost magical energy. Samuel, who had previously gone unnoticed, was now greeted with respectful glances and kind words not only by the store staff, but also by returning customers eager to meet the man behind the voice that had touched hearts on that unforgettable night. His story, chronicled in detail by local newspapers and shared frantically on social media, became a phenomenon in the small town of Nashville, attracting the attention of even regional artists interested in his unique journey. The store, once seen merely as a retail outlet, became a true sanctuary of music and resilience, a space where dreams came to life and the painful past transformed into strength for the future. Samuel spent hours there, playing his guitar, exchanging stories with customers, inspiring young and old, becoming a kind of spiritual guide for those seeking more than simple musical products. Jake, now more of a friend than a salesman, felt his own heart grow in empathy and maturity, recognizing that this connection was living proof that music has the unique power to unite hearts and transform destinies. With each passing day, the friendship between the two men deepened, revealing a true bond that went far beyond the store, a bond woven by respect, admiration, and a shared desire to make a difference in the world. Samuel, for his part, was experiencing a rebirth that went beyond public recognition. He felt a spiritual and emotional renewal that strengthened him to continue his journey. He spent hours in the shop, not only playing, but also teaching young aspiring musicians who arrived shy and hopeful, eager to learn not only the techniques but also the life lessons that only someone with his background could share. Each lesson was permeated by stories of perseverance, faith, and dignity, conveyed with an intensity that came from the soul, the fruit of a life lived with all its pain, sacrifice, and silent achievements. Samuel had become a symbolic figure in the community, a beacon of hope for those facing hardship, a living example that it's never too late to start over, and that true greatness lies in humility, courage, and the ability to love oneself, even in the face of the cruelest adversities. His presence transformed the shop into a space not only for commerce, but also for emotional healing, where every chord and every word echoed resilience and inspiration. The store began to be frequented not only by shoppers, but by people seeking comfort and encouragement, creating an environment of solidarity and mutual support. Jake, in turn, was experiencing an internal transformation as profound as Samuel's. The arrogance and judgment that once dominated him began to crumble like fragile walls before the power of empathy and understanding. He realized that by judging others, he was also limiting himself, creating barriers that prevented him from growing and truly connecting with the people around him. With Samuel by his side, Jake learned to value each individual story, to understand that success isn't measured solely by what's visible or material, but by the impact we have on the lives of others and the emotional legacy we leave. The friendship born from that painful experience became an inexhaustible source of inspiration and motivation for Jake, who began to dream of bigger projects, ideas to bring music, hope, and dignity beyond the walls of the store. Together, they began planning community events, free classes, and even benefit performances, always with the goal of touching hearts and offering a second chance to those who, like Samuel, needed to believe in their own worth again. The story that began with unexpected humiliation thus became a moving journey of friendship, learning, redemption, and transformation, living proof that empathy and respect have the power to open doors to new beginnings and realize dreams. As the months passed, Samuel's inspiring story and his journey of overcoming adversity began to transcend the confines of Henderson's Music Hall and the small but vibrant city of Nashville. Initially modest local radio coverage soon caught the attention of larger regional programs, and the internet quickly became a powerful vehicle for spreading his story. Digital platforms and video channels began to highlight his talent and the profound meaning behind each song, each chord played with the weight of a life filled with silent struggles. Samuel, always with his characteristic humility, saw his music become an unexpected phenomenon, crossing borders and cultures. He received emotional letters, emails, and messages from listeners of all ages, many of whom had never met him in person but felt a deep connection with the message of resilience, hope, and dignity he conveyed. These expressions of support and affection fueled him to continue creating and sharing his art, now aware of the impact his words and melodies had on real lives. Music, once an intimate refuge, had become an invisible bridge between hearts scattered around the world, a powerful channel capable of spreading courage, love, and faith, even in the most difficult situations. In every note and verse, Samuel left a piece of his soul, touching and inspiring those who, like him, struggled to find light amid the shadows. Meanwhile, Henderson's Music Hall grew from a mere storefront to a true cultural and community center, a haven for souls thirsting for connection and inspiration. People of all ages, backgrounds, and histories began to gather regularly in that space, not just to buy instruments, but to celebrate music, life, and the stories Samuel shared with a rare intensity and sincerity. He organized weekly gatherings where he not only played his songs, but also taught profound lessons about perseverance, humility, and dignity in the face of adversity. His words, steeped in years of experience and suffering, resonated in the souls of those seeking more than musical technique, seeking strength to overcome their own struggles. Gradually, the community recognized Samuel as a true guardian of values often lost in the frenetic and impersonal pace of modern life. There, amidst the chords and stories, an invisible bond was created that went beyond mere commercial exchange, founded on empathy, respect, and genuine love. Each meeting served as collective therapy, an opportunity to heal invisible wounds, reclaim forgotten dreams, and renew hope. The environment became a welcoming sanctuary, where each person was valued, encouraged to look within themselves and never give up. For personal transformation begins with recognizing one's own worth and the courage to begin again. Jake, meanwhile, was experiencing a personal transformation that surprised him daily. The walls that pride and arrogance had built within him began to crumble before the immense power of empathy and humility learned alongside Samuel. He began to see the world through new eyes, understanding that being quick to judge was a mistake that limited his ability to grow as a human being and genuinely connect with others. Under Samuel's silent tutelage, Jake learned to value the stories each person carries, realizing that true success isn't measured by what we flaunt or achieve, but by the impact we make on the lives of those around us. The friendship born from that painful and transformative experience became an inexhaustible source of inspiration and motivation, driving Jake to dream of greater projects. Together, they began to develop ambitious plans, musical tours, community workshops, and recordings that would carry the message of resilience and respect beyond the small town of Nashville, reaching diverse audiences thirsty for hope. Jake understood that this new beginning wasn't just a chance for Samuel, but a calling to build a lasting legacy, a mission that combined music, humanity, and social transformation. What began as an unexpected humiliation evolved into a movement of love, solidarity, and renewal, proving that empathy and respect can open doors to new beginnings, fulfilled dreams, and truly touched lives. As Samuel's music and story gained popularity and recognition, doors that once seemed locked began to open, bringing with them challenges that tested their resolve, but also opportunities to expand their impact. Cultural organizations, social institutions, and even educational centers in the region began reaching out to Samuel and Jake, eager to collaborate on projects that used music as a transformative tool for vulnerable communities. Samuel received these invitations with humility and a deep sense of mission, understanding that his personal journey was now transforming into a collective mission of hope and renewal. He began dedicating part of his time to teaching workshops in public schools, shelters for at-risk youth, and community centers, where his teachings went far beyond musical techniques to lessons on self-esteem, resilience, and the importance of never giving up, even in the face of the greatest adversity. In each new class, he saw the rebirth of wounded souls who found in the sound of the strings and the sung words a new reason to believe, to fight, and to rebuild. For Jake, witnessing these achievements represented more than pride. It was living confirmation that that unlikely friendship and partnership had the power to change lives, reinforcing his faith in empathy and respect as the greatest forces capable of transforming not just individuals, but entire communities. Despite his growing success and growing visibility, Samuel never allowed fame and the spotlight to distract him from his simple and true essence. For him, true value lay in the silent transformation that occurred in people's hearts, those subtle shifts, almost invisible to the world, but which carried immense depth and meaning. His routine became a delicate dance between rehearsals at Henderson's Music Hall, community workshops filled with laughter, tears, and discovery, and intimate moments of reflection where, in the soft afternoon light, he wrote new songs that emerged from the stories he encountered along the way. Samuel understood that his mission transcended music. It was a calling to be a beacon of hope, a voice that echoed beyond the walls of the shop, beyond social barriers, and beyond the limitations imposed by life. This awareness renewed his inner strength and gave him the courage to face difficult days, to keep creating, to keep that flame alive even when uncertainty arose. He knew that his music was a bridge that connected people, a universal language capable of touching the deepest wounds and inspiring the courage needed to start over. And this motivated him to move forward, unwavering. Jake, in turn, felt the transformation growing within him, a force that drove him to go beyond what he had ever imagined. He wanted to transform not only the store, but the entire community surrounding it, feeling the weight of the responsibility of being an agent of real change. Inspired by Samuel and driven by the desire to give back to society everything he had learned, Jake began to devise a series of cultural events that combined music, art, and stories of overcoming obstacles, creating welcoming spaces where people could express their emotions, share stories, and find genuine support. With Samuel as a mentor and partner, Jake realized that this journey, which had begun in a moment of judgment and humiliation, had become a personal and social revolution, capable of touching lives and breaking cycles of suffering and prejudice. They began planning to expand their projects, dreaming of tours, workshops in neighboring cities, and recording albums that would carry the message of resilience and dignity beyond the local reach. Their friendship, already strong, became a living example of the power of compassion, transformation, and mutual respect. Together, they proved that even in the darkest moments it is possible to find a path to light, to hope, and to the fulfillment of the deepest dreams of the human soul. As the years passed, the impact of Samuel and Jake's collaborative work surpassed all expectations they had at the beginning of their journey. The small Henderson's Music Hall, once a simple business, became a living symbol of hope, resilience, and transformation, a beacon shining brightly for those facing hardship and seeking a new beginning. Samuel continued to teach with the same humility and passion as always, now before an increasingly large and diverse audience, ranging from shy children and young dreamers to seniors who found in music a safe haven and a stimulus to continue living. Each class, each performance, became a celebration of life, an invitation for each person to recognize their own dignity and worth, regardless of the invisible scars they carried. Samuel knew that his music was not just a talent. It was his mission, his way of leaving a legacy that transcended time and circumstance. This legacy was woven not just with notes and melodies, but with genuine love, deep empathy, and an unwavering courage to keep fighting, even when the world seemed to close its doors. He felt his greater purpose fulfilled, to use music as an instrument to heal, inspire, and unite, transforming lives and hearts into an endless web of hope. Jake, who had begun his career as an arrogant and prejudiced young salesman, had completely transformed himself. He was now a true community leader, an active agent of social change, and a living example of the power of empathy and respect. With his experience alongside Samuel, he took on the responsibility of keeping alive the flame of hope that this humble man had lit, dedicating himself to expanding social and cultural projects with enthusiasm and vision. He organized events that became regional landmarks, attracting thousands of people to celebrations that combined music, art, moving stories of overcoming adversity, and gestures of genuine solidarity. The partnership between Jake and Samuel became a symbol of friendship built on the pillars of respect, mutual learning, and personal and collective transformation. They proved that the greatest revolutions don't begin on grand stages, but within people's hearts, and that these inner transformations are reflected in the world, generating waves of positive change. For Jake, each new initiative was a chance to give back to the community what he had learned, spreading the message that, even in the midst of the most difficult adversities, it is possible to rewrite one's own story, build a promising future, and fuel the flame of hope with concrete and loving actions. The outcome of Samuel and Jake's story offers a profound and timeless lesson that resonates beyond the borders of that small town. True human greatness lies in the ability to look at others with sincere compassion, to recognize the hidden value in people often invisible to the world's hasty gaze, and to keep the flame of hope alive even when all seems lost. The humiliation, pain, and struggles Samuel faced were not in vain. They became the strength that propelled him to move forward and help others find their own path. The legacy he built, now strengthened by his friendship and partnership with Jake, is a testament to the power of human dignity and empathy to transform lives. Music, in this context, ceases to be mere sound and becomes a universal language capable of healing wounds, uniting hearts, and renewing spirits. If you were moved by this story and want to hear more powerful stories of overcoming adversity, love, and hope, subscribe to the channel now and join this community that believes in the transformative power of the human heart. Never underestimate the value of a kind attitude, a respectful gesture. They can be the starting point for something extraordinary and unforgettable.